Your skin creases, your hair thins, your joints ache. What if ancient doctors had wildly different ideas about why this happens? What if they believed your body was like a lamp running out of oil, or a furnace cooling down, or that the stars dictated your final years? What did people from the 1000s, the 1200s, and the 1400s truly think about the inevitable journey to old age? Number 1. Astrological determinism. Imagine living in a world where the stars above were not just distant twinkles, but powerful forces shaping your destiny, including the very length of your life and how you would age. This was a profound belief in the Mythobeal period. People looked up at the night sky and saw a grand celestial clock with planets moving through zodiac signs, each casting a specific influence on earthly beings. Medieval physicians, astronomers, and philosophers often intertwined their understanding of the human body with their knowledge of the cosmos. They held that a person's very constitution, their mix of humors, their innate heat, and even the pace of their aging process were set at the moment of their birth, determined by the planetary alignments. The concept centered on the idea that each planet possessed certain qualities, mirroring the 4 elements and the 4 humors. Saturn, for example, was seen as cold and dry, associated with melancholy, and the elderly Mars was hot and dry, linked to choler. Jupiter was hot and moist, aligned with blood and a sanguine temperament. Venus was warm and moist, mirroring youth and pleasure. The moon, often seen as cold and moist, influenced the body's fluids. The sun, hot and dry, was the source of vital heat. When you were born, the specific positions of these planets in relation to each other and the zodiac signs created a unique astrological chart, a cosmic blueprint for your life. This chart was thought to literally program your physical and mental characteristics, including how quickly your radical moisture would deplete, or how strong your innate heat would remain. Physicians like Michael Scott, a scholar of the 1200s who served Frederick II, delved deeply into astrological medicine. His writings often explored how the heavens influenced health and disease. He described how specific planetary conjunctions at birth could predispose an individual to certain ailments in later life, or determine their overall vitality. A person born under a dominant Saturn, for instance, might be expected to experience a colder, drier old age, perhaps prone to the melancholic diseases often associated with declining years. The belief was not just about the start of life, it was about the entire trajectory. The planets continued their movements, and their ongoing influences, known as transits, were believed to interact with one's natal chart, marking periods of health, illness, or accelerated aging. This understanding of celestial influence meant that physicians sometimes consulted astrologers or possessed astrological knowledge themselves. They would cast a patient's birth chart, not just to diagnose an immediate illness, but to gain insight into their overall constitution and their natural predispositions to aging. If someone showed signs of premature aging, a physician might consult their astrological chart to see if there were specific plumption of vital entrails or an early onset of coldness and dryness. The idea was that some people were simply destined for a longer, more robust life due to their auspicious birth chart, while others were born with a more limited supply of vital energies, predetermined by the cosmic forces at play. The planets were also believed to influence the humors directly. A strong Venus in a birth chart might indicate a balanced, moist temperament, suggesting a youthfulness that would persist longer. A challenging alignment with Mars or Saturn might suggest an excess of hot bile or cold black bile, leading to a more volatile or decaying constitution. The exact degree of dryness or moistness, heat or coldness within a person was thought to be precisely calibrated by the stars at their birth. This provided a framework for understanding individual differences in aging. Why did one person age gracefully while another seemed to wither quickly? The stars had the answer. Astrological medicine offered a sense of order to the often chaotic experience of disease and aging. It provided a predictable pattern, even if that pattern was beyond human control. For medieval thinkers, the universe was an interconnected web, and the human body was a microcosm reflecting the macrocosm of the heavens. The same forces that moved the planets were believed to influence the ebb and flow of life within a person. This meant that, while radical moisture was consumed and innate heat diminished, the rate of that consumption and diminution was, to a significant extent, a celestial decree. A physician might advise on diet and lifestyle to mitigate the effects, but the fundamental predisposition to aging was thought to be written in the stars at the moment of birth. Number 2. Environmental and Tyluk wear and tear. Beyond the internal mechanisms and cosmic decrees, medieval thinkers also recognized that the world around you and the way you lived your life played a significant role in how quickly you aged. This was not just about the inherent qualities of your body, but about the constant interaction between your physical self and your external surroundings. They understood that the elements, the food you ate, the work you performed, and even your emotional state could hasten or slow the journey towards old age. It was a kind of wear and tear, a gradual erosion of the body's vitality caused by a constant exposure and activity. Consider the role of climate and environment. Medieval physicians, following ancient Greek principles, believed that geographical location and the prevailing weather patterns had a direct impact on the body's humors and overall balance. Living in a hot, dry climate, for example, was thought to excessively dry out the body, consuming radical moisture and diminishing innate heat at an accelerated rate. People living in such regions might appear older more quickly, their skin becoming parched and their muscles losing suppleness. Conversely, a cold, moist climate could lead to an excess of phlegm and other watery humors, potentially dampening the vital heat and making the body sluggish. The ideal was a temperate environment, where the qualities of hot, cold, dry, and moist were in a balanced proportion, allowing the body to maintain its equilibrium and age more slowly. Diet was another crucial factor. Food was seen not just as sustenance, but as medicine, directly influencing the balance of humors. Eating foods that were too hot and dry, such as certain spices or heavily cooked meats, was believed to burn up the radical moisture and accelerate the drying process. Conversely, consuming too many cold and moist foods like watery fruits or certain vegetables could dampen the innate heat and lead to a buildup of phlegm. The goal was always moderation and balance. A diet tailored to an individual's constitution, age, and activity level. A young person full of innate heat might tolerate a hotter diet, but an elderly person with dwindling heat and moisture needed foods that were moistening and gently warming, like soft cheeses, eggs, or fish. Overeating, regardless of the food's qualities, was seen as a major contributor to aging, as it burdened the digestive system and led to the production of impure humors, which then contributed to bodily decay. Work and physical activity also figured prominently in this theory of wear and tear. An overly strenuous life, one filled with excessive physical labor or constant mental exertion, was believed to exhaust the vital spirits and consume the radical moisture at a rapid pace. Just as a machine wears out faster with constant heavy use, so too did the human body. Physicians advised against extremes. Too much activity burned up the body's resources. Too little led to stagnation and an accumulation of waste products. A balanced lifestyle with moderate work, regular rest, and gentle exercise was considered essential for preserving one's youth and vitality. Even the act of speaking or singing too much was thought to consume vital energy and contribute to drying. Emotional states were also part of this external influence. Strong passions like intense anger, sorrow, or excessive joy were believed to disrupt the humoral balance and consume the vital spirits. Anger, for instance, was thought to generate excessive heat and dryness, leading to an accelerated loss of moisture. Prolonged sadness was believed to generate coldness and melancholy, stagnating the body's processes. A calm, moderate emotional life was therefore considered a key component of healthy aging. The mind affected the body, and the constant stress of extreme emotions literally wore down the individual's sleep. Was another important element. Insufficient sleep was thought to prevent the body from properly restoring its humors and spirits, leading to an accelerated depletion of vital resources. During sleep, the body's innate heat was believed to retreat inwards, allowing for better digestion and the restoration of radical moisture. Without adequate rest, this restorative process was hampered, and the body remained in a state of consumption. People who consistently deprived themselves of sleep were expected to age more quickly, exhibiting signs of dryness and exhaustion. Medieval medical texts, such as those from the Salerno school, often provided detailed guidelines for maintaining health and prolonging life, known as regimens sanitatis, or regimens of health. These regimens encompassed advice on air, food and drink, exercise and rest, sleep and waking, excretion, and the passions of the mind. All these elements were seen as constant external pressures on the body's internal state. They did not cause aging in the sense of a fixed internal clock, but they certainly accelerated or slowed the inherent processes of decay. A balanced lifestyle, therefore, was not merely a choice. It was a fundamental defense against the inexorable march of time, a way to mitigate the constant wear and tear that everyday life inflicted upon the human body. Number 3. Wakening of the faculties and spirits. Medieval medicine did not simply describe the body as a collection of parts, but as a complex system animated by invisible forces known as spirits and governed by various faculties. As a person aged, these animating forces were believed to weaken, leading to the decline seen in older individuals. This was a sophisticated concept deeply rooted in Aristotelian and Galenic thought, which held that life itself depended on these subtle, airy substances. The body's ability to perform its functions from digestion to thought relied on the proper flow and strength of these spirits. There were generally 3 main types of spirits: the natural spirits, the vital spirits, and the animal spirits. Each had a specific role and was associated with a particular organ system. The natural spirits were formed in the liver from the chyle, the milky fluid produced from digested food. These spirits were responsible for the vegetative functions of the body: growth, nutrition, and reproduction. They nourished the body's tissues, ensured proper assimilation of food, and facilitated the body's natural processes of repair and replenishment. As a person aged, the liver's ability to produce these natural spirits was believed to decline. The humors became less pure, and the generative power weakened. This meant that the body's capacity for self-renewal diminished. Old bones became brittle, muscles wasted, and skin lost its elasticity because the natural spirits, the very essence of bodily sustenance, were no longer as potent or plentiful. The body's fundamental ability to grow and maintain itself was slowly fading, like a plant that struggles to absorb nutrients from the soil. The vital spirits were generated in the heart from the natural spirits, refined and mixed with air drawn in through the lungs. These were the spirits of life itself, responsible for maintaining the innate heat, circulating blood, and enabling essential bodily functions like respiration and pulse. They were the engine of the body's heat, sustaining the warmth necessary for life. As aging progressed, the heart's capacity to produce and distribute these vital spirits was thought to lessen. The innate heat would naturally diminish, and the pulse might become weaker or more irregular. This decline in vital spirits meant a general loss of vigor, a feeling of coldness, and a reduced capacity for physical exertion. An older person's sluggishness, or their increased susceptibility to cold, was attributed to this weakening of the vital engine. The heart, the very center of life, became less efficient at generating and distributing the life-sustaining warmth and motion throughout the body. The animal spirits were the most refined of all, produced in the brain from the vital spirits and distributed through the nerves. These were the spirits of sensation, movement, and thought. They allowed us to perceive the world through our senses, to move our limbs, and to engage in reason, memory, and imagination. As a person aged, the brain's ability to generate and utilize these animal spirits was believed to wane. This explained why older individuals might experience a decline in their senses, such as impaired vision or hearing. Their movements might become slower and less coordinated, and their memory might falter. The sharpness of youth, the quickness of wit, and the clarity of perception were all tied to the vigor of these animal spirits. When they weakened, the mental and sensory faculties diminished. The pathways through which these spirits traveled, the nerves, were also thought to become less permeable or less efficient, over time further impeding their flow. The weakening of these spirits was often linked to the depletion of radical moisture and the diminution of innate heat. The spirits themselves were considered subtle, airy forms of moisture and heat. As the radical moisture, the fundamental fuel, was consumed, and as the innate heat, the active principle, dwindled, the production and potency of the spirits necessarily declined. It was a cascading effect. Less radical moisture meant less fuel for innate heat. Less innate heat meant less ability to refine humors into spirits. Less refined spirits meant weaker bodily functions. Medieval physicians, such as Avicenna, in his Canon of Medicine, extensively described the role of these spirits in health and disease. He detailed how the quality and quantity of each spirit affected different bodily functions. When a patient exhibited signs of aging, a physician would assess which spirits seemed most affected. Perhaps their appetite was poor natural spirits, their pulse weak, vital spirits, or their memory failing, animal spirits. The decline was holistic, a gradual weakening of the entire spiritual scaffolding of the body. This understanding meant that while external factors and humors played a role, the fundamental driver of aging was often seen as this slow, inexorable decay of the body's very animating forces, leaving the physical structure without its vital spark. Number 4. Desiccation and calcification of tissues. One of the most observable aspects of aging is the changing nature of the body's physical substance. Skin becomes dry and wrinkled, bones grow brittle, and joints stiffen. Medieval physicians had a direct, literal explanation for these changes. The body was quite simply drying out and hardening, undergoing a process of desiccation and calcification. This theory was deeply intertwined with the concepts of radical moisture and innate heat, seeing the physical body as a direct manifestation of their decline. The belief was that from birth, the body contained a certain inherent moistness, a youthful pliancy and softness which was essential for life. This moistness allowed for flexibility, growth, and the proper functioning of organs, as the innate heat, which was constantly active within the body, worked to consume the radical moisture. The body's tissues would inevitably begin to dry. This drying was not seen as a simple loss of water, but a fundamental alteration in the very consistency of the flesh, bones, and organs. It was a gradual transformation from a moist, pliable state to a dry, rigid one. Think of a fresh piece of fruit or a young plant. It is full of moisture, supple and vibrant. Over time, as it dries, it shrivels, hardens, and loses its vitality. Medieval physicians applied this exact analogy to the human body. The youthful body was like a well-watered plant full of internal sap. The aging body was like a dried-up husk, with its moisture evaporated and its internal structure becoming rigid. The skin, for instance, was seen as a direct indicator of this process. Young skin was moist and smooth. Old skin, with its wrinkles and dryness, clearly showed the effects of moisture loss. The thinning of hair and its tendency to become brittle were also seen as evidence of this widespread desiccation. Beyond drying, there was also the concept of calcification or hardening. This was often described as the body's internal structures becoming more earthy and rigid. Bones, which were already considered naturally dry and earthy, would become excessively so, leading to their increased fragility in old age. Cartilages and tendons, which provided flexibility to joints, would also dry out and harden, causing stiffness and pain in movement. The very vessels that carried blood and spirits were thought to lose their elasticity, becoming more rigid and less efficient. This literal hardening of the body's internal architecture contributed to the overall decline in mobility and function. Galen, whose medical theories formed the bedrock of medieval medicine, extensively described the qualities of the body and its parts. He observed that children were inherently moist and warm, while the elderly were cold and dry. This observation was foundational to the desiccation theory. The process of aging was a progressive shift from a youthful, moist, warm temperament to an aged, cold, dry one. This change in qualities was believed to alter the very substance of the body. Physicians like Avicenna also discussed the changes in tissue quality with age. He noted that the substances of the body become thicker and coarser, losing their youthful subtlety and fineness. This meant that passages in vessels might become obstructed and the body's natural functions hampered by increasing rigidity. The digestive organs, for example, might become less efficient, and the elimination of waste products could be impaired, leading to a buildup of morbid humors, which in turn could further accelerate the drying process. The practical implications of this theory were visible in medieval medical advice. To counteract the drying and hardening, physicians often recommended diets rich in moistening foods, soft cheeses, fats, oily fish, and specific fruits or vegetables that were considered to have a moistening quality. They might also prescribe baths or emollients to help retain external moisture. Moderate exercise, often gentle and slow, was recommended to maintain flexibility without generating excessive heat that would further consume moisture. The aim was to lubricate the internal machinery and prevent it from seizing up due to lack of moisture and excessive rigidity. The belief was that while aging was an inevitable process, its physical manifestations of dryness and stiffness could be mitigated through careful regimen and a constant battle against the body's natural tendency to wither and harden. Number 5. Humoral dysregulation and the predominance of melancholy. The cornerstone of medieval medicine was the theory of the 4 humors: blood, yellow bile, choler, black bile, melancholy, and phlegm. These 4 bodily fluids, derived from the 4 elements and possessing specific qualities: hot, moist, hot, dry, cold, moist, were believed to determine a person's temperament, health, and susceptibility to disease. Aging in this framework was not just a decline in general, but a specific shift in the balance of these humors, often leading to an excess of the cold and dry humor, black bile or melancholy. In youth, the body was generally understood to be hot and moist, dominated by blood, leading to a sanguine temperament. This explained the vitality, growth, and energetic nature of young people. As a person matured, the humors would shift ideally, maintaining a healthy balance throughout adulthood. However, as one entered old age, the body's innate heat diminished, and its radical moisture was consumed. This natural decline in heat and moisture made the body more susceptible to the qualities of coldness and dryness. Black bile, being cold and dry, would naturally become more predominant. This increasing presence of black bile or melancholy was believed to have profound effects on the aging body and mind. Melancholy was associated with a range of symptoms that medieval people recognized in the elderly: a tendency towards sadness, introspection, fear, and even paranoia. Physically, an excess of black bile was thought to contribute to a darkening of the skin. Dryness, constipation, and an increased susceptibility to coldness. The blood, which was vital and warm, was slowly superseded by the sluggish, dark, and cold black bile. Physicians like Avicenna and Galen extensively discussed the various states of humoral imbalance and their corresponding diseases. For the elderly, the prevalence of black bile was often linked to specific ailments. Arthritis, with its stiffness and pain, could be seen as an accumulation of cold, dry humors in the joints. Digestive issues, particularly constipation, were attributed to the drying and cooling effects of melancholy. Mental changes such as a decline in memory or an increased tendency towards worry and despondency were also direct results of black bile's influence on the brain. The brain, if pervaded by cold and dry humors, would lose its sharpness and fluidity of thought. The medieval understanding of melancholy was much broader than our modern concept of depression. It encompassed a state of profound physiological and psychological decline, often seen as the natural temperament of old age. While some people might be melancholic from birth due to their innate constitution, old age was believed to induce melancholy in nearly everyone. The body's inability to produce sufficient pure blood and generate enough heat meant that the waste products, particularly the dregs of the blood, would accumulate as black bile. This was a direct result of the cooling and drying processes inherent in aging. To counteract this shift, medieval physicians offered specific humoral therapies for the elderly. They would recommend foods that were warm and moist, such as soft, rich meats, eggs, and specific moistening herbs, to help restore the lost heat and moisture and dilute the black bile. They might prescribe gentle laxatives to help eliminate accumulated melancholic humors. Warm baths and moist compresses were also suggested to soothe the drying body. Exercise was advised, but in moderation, always aiming to generate a gentle warmth without expending too much vital heat. The emotional state was also managed. Soothing music, pleasant company, and avoiding excessive worry were prescribed to keep the melancholic tendencies at bay. The concept of humoral dysregulation meant that aging was not merely a mechanical breakdown, but a shifting internal ecology. The harmonious balance of youth gave way to the disproportionate dominance of cold and dry humors, specifically black bile. This explained not only the physical frailties, but also the perceived emotional and psychological changes associated with growing old. The body, in its natural progression, was literally becoming less vibrant, less warm, and less moist, inevitably leading to a state where melancholy cast its long, cold, dry shadow over the final years of life. Number 6. Diminution of innate heat. For medieval physicians, life itself was synonymous with heat. The human body was believed to possess an inherent vital warmth from the moment of conception, often referred to as innate heat or radical heat. This internal furnace was the engine of all life processes: digestion, circulation, movement, and even thought. Aging in this view was fundamentally a process of this innate heat, slowly diminishing, like a fire gradually burning down to embers. This concept originated with the ancient Greeks, particularly Hippocrates and Aristotle, and was profoundly elaborated upon by Galen, whose writings formed the bedrock of medieval medicine. They believed that everyone was born with a certain amount of this innate heat, concentrated in the heart and distributed throughout the body by the vital spirits. This heat was not just a passive quality, but an active force, constantly working to transform food into humors, to circulate fluids, and to maintain the body's functions. It was the principle of animation. The innate heat was believed to be inextricably linked to radical moisture. Radical moisture was the fuel, and innate heat was the fire. Just as a fire consumes its fuel, so too did the innate heat consume the radical moisture throughout a person's life. Every beat of the heart, every breath, every act of digestion, every thought, every emotion, every movement, all these processes required and consumed the innate heat, and by extension, its fuel, the radical moisture. This constant consumption meant that over time the body's internal fire would inevitably begin to wane. As the innate heat diminished, its effects were visible throughout the body. Older people were often described as feeling colder, especially in their extremities. Their skin might become pallid or dry, reflecting a lack of internal warmth. Their metabolism would slow down, making digestion less efficient and leading to feelings of sluggishness. The pulse, the outward manifestation of the heart's vital heat, might become weaker or slower. The overall energy and vitality of youth, driven by a strong and abundant innate heat, would gradually give way to the coldness and lethargy of old age. Medieval physicians understood that external factors could accelerate or slow this decline. Exposure to excessive cold, for example, was thought to directly dampen the innate heat. A diet of excessively cold or difficult to digest foods would also burden the internal fire, forcing it to work harder and thus consume itself more quickly. Overexertion, whether physical or mental, was also believed to consume the innate heat at an accelerated pace, leaving less for the later years. Conversely, living in a temperate climate, maintaining a balanced diet, and engaging in moderate activity were all seen as ways to conserve the precious innate heat. Medical advice for the elderly often revolved around conserving and gently stimulating the innate heat. Warm foods and drinks were recommended, sometimes fortified with warming spices. Warm clothing and environments were advised to protect against external cold. Gentle exercise, such as walking, was encouraged to generate a mild internal warmth without expending too much energy. Physicians might also prescribe warming poultices or baths. The goal was not to reignite a dying fire to its youthful vigor, which was deemed impossible, but to keep the remaining embers glowing for as long as possible, making the decline more comfortable and gradual. The idea of a finite supply of innate heat also explained individual differences in lifespan. Some individuals were believed to be born with a stronger, more robust innate heat, allowing them to live longer and more vigorously. Others might have a weaker, more fragile heat from birth, predisposing them to a shorter lifespan. This was often tied to their astrological constitution or inherited qualities. The inevitability of aging was rooted in this fundamental concept. The fire of life, once lit, was destined to burn out, and old age was simply the final cold embers of that process. The process was seen as natural and unavoidable, a fundamental law of existence where warmth and vitality slowly yielded to coldness and decay. Number 7. Depletion of radical moisture. In the intricate tapestry of medieval medical thought, one of the most prominent and pervasive theories explaining why people grew old centered on a concept known as radical moisture. This was not just any moisture like water in a cup, but a fundamental, innate, and vital fluid that was believed to be present in the body from birth. It was the very essence of life, the moist and pliable substance that gave the body its youthful vigor, flexibility, and capacity for growth. Aging, in this view, was the slow, inevitable depletion of this precious finite resource. The origins of this theory stretched back to ancient Greek medicine, particularly the ideas of Aristotle and Galen, which formed the bedrock of medieval medical understanding. They observed that young bodies were naturally moist and soft, while old bodies were dry, wrinkled, and brittle. This observation led to the conclusion that life began with a certain amount of this inherent moisture, and that every living process, every metabolic action, every moment of life, slowly consumed it. Imagine your body as a lamp, and the radical moisture as the oil within that lamp. From the moment the lamp is lit at birth, the flame of life, the innate heat slowly but surely burns through the oil. Over time, as the oil is consumed, the flame dwindles, and eventually the lamp goes out. This was the powerful analogy used by medieval physicians to explain the aging process. The radical moisture was the irreplaceable fuel, and its continuous consumption by the body's internal heat and activities led to an inevitable decline. Symptoms of old age were seen as direct evidence of this drying out. Dry skin, fine wrinkles, brittle bones, stiff joints, and the loss of teeth were all considered clear indicators that the body was losing its fundamental moisture. Hair thinning and turning gray were also part of this desiccation process. The body literally became drier, harder, and less pliable as its radical moisture diminished. The ability to regenerate and repair tissues, which relied on this vital fluid, also decreased. Medieval medical texts, such as the widely influential Canon of Medicine by Avicenna, a Persian physician whose work was translated into Latin and studied across Europe, delved deeply into the concept of radical moisture. Avicenna described it as the humidum primum, or primary humidity, the very substance that made life possible. He explained how its gradual consumption led to the decline in bodily functions and the eventual cessation of life. He also noted that while the process was inevitable, certain lifestyle choices could accelerate or slow down the rate of consumption. Physicians believed that anything that generated excessive heat or dryness in the body would hasten the depletion of radical moisture. This included overly strenuous physical activity, which was thought to burn up the moisture. Consuming a diet too rich in hot and dry foods, such as certain spices or heavily cooked meats, was also believed to contribute to accelerated drying. Strong emotional states, such as anger or intense excitement, were also thought to generate internal heat and consume the vital fluid. Even too much thinking or intellectual effort was seen as a cause of moisture loss, as the brain required considerable heat and moisture for its functions. Conversely, medical advice for prolonging life and combating the effects of aging often focused on preserving. This meant a regimen of moderation in all things: moderate exercise, moderate diet, and moderate emotions. Physicians would recommend a diet that was moistening and gently cooling, featuring foods like soft cheeses, certain kinds of fish, leafy greens, and fruits that were considered moist. Avoiding excessive heat, whether from external sources or from internal overexertion, was also crucial. Adequate sleep was emphasized, as sleep was believed to allow the body to restore and conserve its moisture, giving the innate heat a chance to retreat inwards and work more gently. The theory of radical moisture depletion provided a comprehensive explanation connecting the internal biological processes with external lifestyle factors. It painted a picture of life as a slow, predetermined decay of a finite resource, with old age being the point where that resource was nearly exhausted, leaving the body dry, brittle, and without the vital essence that sustained its youth and vigor.